Live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very exciting video panel that we have here today, sponsored by IT Revolution. The DevOps Enterprise Summit is coming up in London. It is the week after next, on June the 25th and 26th. That's the Monday and Tuesday of that week. We're really looking forward to it. Today we've got a number of speakers that have been either speaking at previous DOES Enterprise Summit events or at future ones, or indeed at this one. So it's going to be at the O2. My name is Helen Beal. I am a DevOps editor InfoQ, also sponsoring this video panel. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to our guests. So we have Jelena, Laketic from UBS. We have Mark Howell from Lloyd's Banking Group, and we have Tom Clark from ITV. So starting with Jelena, could you tell us a little bit more about the organisation you work for and your role there, please?
So my name is Jelena Laketic. I work for UBS, which is the biggest Swiss bank, existing for more than 150 years. I'm actually currently, I've been in UBS 12 years, but currently I'm heading asset management SWAT team, which is not the military team. It's actually a software action team brought in to bring a bit of applied innovation in asset management space.
Mark, please tell us a little bit more about you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Depending where you are, obviously. My name is Mark Howell. I'm the DevOps lead with Lloyd's Banking Group. Lloyd's Banking Group, one of the big UK retail banks in the UK. My role currently encompasses setting strategy and direction around our DevOps journeys across all of our group transformation enterprise.
Thank you very much. And Tom, let us know some more about you.
Hello everyone, good afternoon from London. I'm Tom Clark. I'm the head of comm platform at ITV. ITV is the UK's largest kind of integrated producer broadcaster. So we make a whole load of kind of commercial television that we broadcast around the UK and we sell around the world. Classics like Love Island and Jeremy Carlin, Tipping Point and Downton Abbey. I'm head of comm platform. In that role, I manage a team of about 18 platform engineers who actually essentially form the DevOps function of ITV.
Fantastic. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to have you all here. So let's start by talking a little bit about DevOps. So let's go the reverse way through the panel. So this time, Tom, can you tell us a bit about what's drawn you to this thing that we call DevOps?
Yeah, sure. So my background in my career, I've actually flipped back and forth between development, admittedly Perl development, but I do consider myself a recovering Perl developer these days, and then various kind of operations roles as well. And so because of that, when I was a developer and I had that operations background, I was thinking to myself, the code that I write, how can I make it more operable? Trying to think about kind of the person on the other side, when it was still dev and ops, how they would run it, how to make my code kind of more friendly from their side. And then conversely, when I was kind of in more of an operations role, I was thinking, what data am I collecting about the software that I'm running, the applications that I'm running on behalf of the developers that they would find useful? If they knew that their system was throwing out loads of errors all the time, that it was having difficulty reconnecting to things when things went down, could they actually help improve that? And so kind of almost as an individual doing that loop. And then my first real experience of DevOps, before it was called that, I think it was 2007. I was working for a startup company called TrueTap, and we were a very small kind of group. We had about 10 people, I think, when I first started. And our sysadmin sat two kind of seats down from me. And I was a Perl developer at the time, and we just had to speak about how to get stuff done. And that was actually kind of like proto-DevOps, people just working together and collaborating and solving problems. And then beyond that, that kind of caught on across the industry. And I remember going to some of the first DevOps meetups in London in 2010, 2011 kind of time. And now, it's kind of gone way beyond the Simon Wardley pioneer settlers, way into the kind of the town planners phase, and we've got enterprise DevOps, and actually it's being productized and commercialized by a lot of kind of organizations as well. So it's interesting to kind of see it from the very, very beginning, before it was called DevOps, all the way now to actually where it's just BAU for many, many organizations.
And you're speaking at this year's DOES event in London, that's right?
That's right.
And you spoke last year and the year before?
I was there for the first DOES in London, yeah. So it's an honor and a privilege to kind of be back for my third time.
And what are you speaking about this year, and how have your talks evolved, do you think, over the last 3 years?
It's a bit of a different kind of tack actually for me this year. So my first year I spoke about kind of DevOps the ITV way, because I'd just taken over this role at ITV, and I wanted to kind of share what we were doing as a large organization. Last year I spoke about kind of Windows the ITV way, which is taking all of the findings we've done from the DevOps stuff and applying DevOps to Windows, which has been a kind of an interesting project I've been spending most of the past year on. And this year, I'm kind of speaking about kind of happy teams, the ITV way, or really kind of solving the happiness, because my team is absolutely fantastic. And I find the best way to motivate them and to get them to be high performing is actually by trying to make them happy. I think many organizations, they kind of say, be high performing. And actually, I kind of think, actually, if you can make people happy, generally they'll become high performing almost as a side effect. And so my talk is quite kind of short and sweet, but it's really talking about how I kind of try to actually make my team happy and therefore kind of make them high performing as well.
Lovely. So the human ops, hug ops element of life.
It's definitely more onto that side. So there's nods to the tech, but actually it's very much kind of the people side, culture side, actually how to actually motivate people. And you know, I've got a wonderful team of technical people. I still consider myself a very, very technical manager, but you know, most of my job now is actually kind of looking after my team. And I think it's kind of appropriate now for me to kind of start speaking more about that kind of side of things, which I think is absolutely fascinating, because you can't read the log file of a human, you can't go and change their config, you've got to kind of really kind of work it out from the outside, and I find it's an absolutely fascinating challenge.
Not yet, anyway. They do talk about downloading people's brains, don't they? So got that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. Mark, can you tell us a bit more about what drew you into the DevOps world?
Yeah, sure. So my history is software engineering. A bit like Tom, I've sort of flip-flopped into the operations world as well over my 20-year career. But I always say that I was doing DevOps before we coined the phrase, because as again, myself, you know, considering myself as a bit of a Perl developer as well back in the day, Tom, I don't think I've recovered actually, but what we used to do is spend a lot of high energy work, you know, writing frameworks and tools and things like that to automate, build, deployment, releases, things like that. So before the days where we had the tool set and, you know, the kit bag that we have today. So I suppose back in 2013, I was offered a role which had DevOps in the title, and it was around that sort of time that the term exploded really, and we started to get visibility at C-level of this word called DevOps. You know, a bit of ambiguity about that, what that really meant across organizations, but was offered an opportunity to basically carry on doing what I was doing before, with a bit more money, a bit more of a dedicated team, with a single focus on our internet banking platform within Lloyd's Banking Group, and it's moved on from there. So I think been doing it for a while, but I think we've all acknowledged the fact some years ago what DevOps is and what it's about now, and I blatantly, you know, abuse the term internally when I want to have a conversation, whether it be around finance, whether about motivation, reasons for doing things, etc. So that's what's brought me into the movement. Very similar to Tom, really, in terms of my history being, you know, come from a technical background, definitely a nod to the technology, but we know the landscape at the moment. Things move so quickly, it's hard to hang your hat on one individual thing. But the thing that fascinates me now, and very much takes most of my focus, is how the people aspect in this. So we have a large development organization of around 18,000 colleagues. We are very geographically dispersed. We use offshore suppliers, and bringing that cultural aspect of, you know, changing the ways of working and belief systems is definitely the focus for us at the moment.
We'll be talking a lot more about that, so changing those belief systems. So thanks for bringing that up. That's an awesome subject area. Now, Las Vegas is quite a way away. So do you know what you're going to be talking about there yet, or is that to be confirmed?
Well, definitely the theme is going to be how we've evolved our journey, you know, so because when I presented last year, there were some key messages about how we were trying to transform the cultural aspect of working within Lloyd's and the nod to DevOps. We spent a lot of time building a brand awareness, you know, bringing some key messages and key principles to the definition, and ultimately how we bring partners with us. So I'm hoping that come October time, we've got some big technology plays, but again, I'm more interested in communicating where we've come to at this point in time, how we're bringing that collaborative communications and that cultural feel across a very dispersed enterprise.
Well, sadly, I'm not going to make it to Las Vegas, but I think everything will be broadcasted live or certainly recorded once it's over, so I'll be able to catch up. So looking forward to that too. Thank you, Mark. Jelena, can you tell us a bit about what drew you to this thing we call DevOps, please?
So maybe actually kind of a similar story, like in the cases of other guys, only I joined, I came from the side of developers. When I joined the bank, it was just before that whole mortgage crisis, and I joined investment bank. And I have to say, I always like to say we were agile and we were using DevOps before we actually knew that's how it's called. There was basically, we just had a necessity to deliver continuously. We had lots of firefighting. Investment bank was losing money left and right, and technology was there to actually support the traders, support front, middle, back office. And so we were really working around the clock, and not just firefighting, but we had to develop new features. We had to make sure that the new features we're bringing in are not breaking the old features. And basically, we had to work very closely with our support team, and they were doing exactly those things. They had many tools, how to build fast, how to release quickly into production. And on top of it, we had to work with a QA team to make sure that we're not releasing just garbage into our production and making our clients pissed off and less productive. So it was really the question of efficiency that we were trying to achieve, and some good quality releases that pushed us to just work together closely and to just embrace both principles, Agile and DevOps. So for me, I have to say later on, after working a few years this way, I just couldn't even imagine to work any other way. It also, as a developer, it makes sense because when you are decoupled from the operations, you're flying blind a bit, and it's just not the same. So logically, also, I felt personally that that's just the way to go, and I accepted it.
Great. It's great to hear all of you gone through such a journey with DevOps and have been doing it for so long, like pre the term kind of existed. I think when DevOps first got coined, it was very much about what we were just talking about, that relationship between Dev and Ops. But more recently, I feel it's broadened somewhat, and some of the challenges that we're really trying to address are around how the business and technology teams work across the whole value stream. So that's really what we're going to kind of tie the conversation we're going to have today around. So let's have a think through this lens, and Jelena, I'll ask you a bit more later about your talk at the event. I know that I didn't just do that just then. But let's talk about the concept of being a technology company. So lots of organizations like Target, a massive US retailer, and Alaska Air, a kind of smallish, medium-sized airline, and Domino's Pizza have stood up and described themselves as technology companies. So this time I'm going to throw this question at Mark. So Mark, do you consider that the organisation you work for, Lloyd's Banking Group, is it a technology company? If you believe that, is it shared across the organisation, that view? And what does the view at the higher levels in the organisation look like?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? So for those of you who outside the UK, Lloyd's Banking Group, we're a UK retail bank, right? So our brand focus is banking. So you mentioned Lloyd's Banking Group to anybody in the UK, they'll think of the Black Horse, they'll think of our banking brands. As a technology company, certainly I view it as an engineering company, and it's something we're working very hard on, rebranding ourselves as, and the examples you phrased there, Target, Domino's, Alaska, those guys themselves now are very prevalent in the industry, known as technology companies in the way in which they've transformed themselves. So we're very much on a journey to try and get to that position as well. We have some great people doing some great things. We have a very large mobile banking footprint. We have the largest mobile bank in Europe. So we are very, quite technology focused, but maybe not known because of our brand as a UK retail bank. Recently, we've even focused a little bit more on our engineering brand. So within a strategic reorganization that we've just gone through, just starting this year, we have an engineering function now branded as engineering. We've all given an identity around engineering, And it's not something we've been very good at in the past, if we're being honest. You know, we're great developers, but ultimately it comes back to that, you know, that clan, that guild, that identity around being that quality engineering organization.
And what do you think it is that's driving that transformation? What's the key thing that you're trying to get to as an outcome?
Well, I think in the current climate, you know, technology is eating the world. You know, we have to almost, you know, be running at full pelt just to keep still. Around, you know, the technology world, the banking world as well, our 250-year brand means nothing to the likes of Monzo, Facebook, all of those players that want to actually come and eat our lunch, right? So what we're doing is responding to that and ultimately trying to reshape ourselves as that engineering-focused organization so we can bring that best value to customers, so that when we have multiple options in the marketplace around, you know, a Monzo card, a Lloyd credit card, or whatever the thing is, that ultimately we're front and center with that first-class world-leading customer experience around our journeys and our mobile applications.
I love that phrase you just used. What was it? Running at full pelt to keep still. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, right? Because these days, you know, I mean, we're all trying to get over the line quickly, but bear in mind as well, in our market segment, we have regulations. So open banking, GDPR, some of the things you guys have heard lots about and probably been swamped with emails over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But ultimately, we have to hit those areas. Otherwise, you know, the regulator will start finding us as well. And those things keep coming thick and fast. At the same time, trying to respond to technology innovations, as well as responding to the marketplace around us.
Yeah. So Jelena, as someone representing another very large bank with a long and very prestigious history, how does your world look in terms of being a technology company with the things that Mark's just talked about in terms of competitive disruptors like Monzo and the regulations and things like that that are coming through?
Well, when you are thinking about regulations, if you double them, this is what you have in Switzerland, because Switzerland is also very, very protective about its whole banking industry. And also, in the last few years especially, we had loads of problems across the world because of obvious benefits that we are offering for people having accounts in our country. So we have additional regulation on top of additional regulation that we need to satisfy. And, you know, in a same way, we had to find a way to actually reshape everything that we had to adapt to this regulation. And not just that, to be able to readapt if it's needed. So we have to be always in a constant change. And, you know, you can't do that now with a piece of paper and a pencil. You have to actually use technology to be as fast as possible and even ahead our competitors. Here in Switzerland, for example, you know, there's several banks that are quite digitalized, and we are always on a lookout to be a bit better than them and still be on top of our game worldwide. So, you know, technology is just the only way nowadays that that we can do that. And obviously, for me, being a software engineer myself, this is a no-brainer. But I think it's even, for me personally, I think it's beautiful to see that technology became that important, and that even the companies that you wouldn't think they are technology companies had to become one in order to be part of the future. It may be just kind of as an additional, you know, even before I joined UBS, I have to say, because I'm not Swiss, when I was headhunted for UBS, I did a bit of a research. And at that time, I was very much surprised how already then UBS, especially investment bank, had innovation type of labs working closely with a local university, which is one of the top technical universities in Europe and in the world. So it's nothing new to us, obviously, but you know, it's maybe newer to the world. Let's put it this way.
I'd love to talk about the Innovation Lab just for a couple of minutes more, actually. I like seeing Innovation Labs, but they always worry me a little bit that we're kind of siloing innovation and making it some people's jobs and not allowing everyone to have access to it. Did you have any chats about that sort of thing?
Well, the thing is about innovation labs, I think they're very much necessary as a kind of just enabling people to explore the concepts, the current concepts, the similar as a think tanks that we also have. However, for me, I personally believe, and again, being an engineer, that you have to have a hands-on experience. So, for example, my team is more applied innovation. And when I say applied innovation, it means you take really the innovative concepts and try to incorporate them in the subjects and in the problems that we have, concrete problems that we have, and something that is most difficult, try to run them in a production environment, because this is usually where everything gets tricky. It's very easy to run this on your Mac in your nice environment, but try to bring that in a big, giant company where you have to raise millions requests to actually have somebody push this into production. So I think I'm a strong believer of applied innovation. However, one of the concepts that I've been actively supporting and pushing since 2014 are hackathons, which is also the way to show this kind of a concept across the organization. And it's also a very good cultural change tool, because it really shows that you can do things in 24 hours, but only if you enable people to work, you know, in a bit more free environment, still secure, but a kind of a sandbox, more free environment. And it also creates, you know, it breaks those silos and allows everybody with a great idea to join for 2 days and show what they can do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Tom, do you have much experience doing things like innovation labs or hackathons at ITV or elsewhere?
Not at present, and it's something we are kind of looking at addressing. I think ITV, actually we mentioned the financial crash earlier on, around 2008, 2009 time. That was a very difficult time for us, because back then 95% of our revenue came from television advertising. And obviously during a financial crash, companies that advertised with us, you know, they tightened their belts and they withdrew, and it was a very difficult time for the organization. And you can tell from our share price how tough. And we had to make some pretty kind of tough decisions around where to kind of cut and where to slim back. And I think actually at that point we did kind of trim away some of the slack and flex that we had in the system in order to save the company. And I think now we've come through, we're stronger than ever. I think we, you know, on the same revenue, we increased our profits 5 times on the same revenue. And now, as a result of being so lean, but I think what we did lose in that process, that transfer, in order to save the company, was that kind of that slack and that breathing room to kind of really be looking 5 years ahead and having an innovation lab. That's not to say that we don't have kind of hackathons and things, but they're more localized. So most of our software development at ITV is done in the form of a product team. And inside that product team, there's a lot of, they'll have a number of assigned developers. And if they, you know, work the product owner and the delivery manager to say, okay, we've planned our kind of sprints ahead. We know that we're going to have a bit of downtime or, you know, a day or something to work on this thing. We can actually get together and do a hack. And we've had some really kind of cool stuff come out of those kind of projects. You know, a cool Slack bot actually that allowed us to query our content delivery pipeline. And you could now ask it, where is this bit of content? And it'll do all the API calls in the background and come back and say, that bit of content has reached this stage. It's going at this many megabits per second. It's being transcoded there. And that would have historically been an email into a kind of a content ops team, who would have then gone and checked the various systems themselves and maybe hours later responded back with an email. But that's something that came out of a hack day. And I think that particular hack kind of went up, and the CTO saw that and says, you know, how can we get more of this kind of stuff? Because that wasn't on a backlog. That was actually just a load of developers thinking, hey, I know I've got this API and this API. How can we kind of do that? And I think kind of a hack day, or kind of the concept of 20% time or 10% time and giving people an opportunity is really key. But again, the challenge we face, and I think some of the questions we're facing is, we're always looking to deliver. We're always kind of very kind of efficient as an organization. How do you balance out a hack day when it appears like you're not delivering story points? So convincing our partners in the business that actually a day off is actually acceptable, when ultimately it helps the entire organization. But on some columns of some spreadsheets, that means we're not working on delivering story points, and that's an ongoing challenge.
It's tough, isn't it? We see a lot of organisations that find it hard just to pay down technical debt, actually, in terms of not doing change. So getting to that next level of writing experimentation and learning into a sprint is definitely a high level of capability.
It is key, because I think, a classic line is, if you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else will. And you need that capacity to kind of be doing the real kind of moonshot style things, and just doing very short, cheap experiments to see if anything sticks. Not a massive project, but then pick out the ones that survive that, put them down into more of a kind of a more advanced team, and eventually get them into the teams that actually build the entire production grade thing. Obviously, we spoke about banks being disrupted by kind of upstart companies like Monzo or Tandem. ITV, obviously, we've been around since 1955, very, very popular broadcaster and kind of commercial broadcaster and producer. But Netflix, in the time that I've been at ITV, has gone from a DVD shipper to one of the biggest media producers and kind of streaming services in the world. We've got lots of legacy systems. We're slowly kind of killing them off, but they don't. And I think that's kind of why we talk about DevOps, we talk about agility, we talk about the benefits of those. Is because it means that when an upstart like that kind of comes along, we can actually move the business around. I say, okay, we need to pivot, we need to do this, we need to do this better. So I think that's kind of where the evolution of DevOps is coming for me. It's no longer just Dev and Ops. People talk about DevSecOps, Biz DevOps. It's actually, it's almost like Star Ops or Star. It's just everyone working together and collaborating and having fewer silos, rather than moving the information around between the teams, get the people together and keep them all in one place. And I think that's kind of where we see it happening at ITV, where in our online division, which is where the ITV Hub, our video on demand platform, lives, those are now the technology team. Used to be a separate team, very closely aligned, but separate. And now actually, they're actually one and the same. So our online business, whether it's technology, whether editors, whether they're designers, it's all one function now. And I think that's probably where the rest of the company will go in time.
It really is about optimizing that value stream from idea all the way through to realization.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a key thing as well, is that, I'm a big fan of kind of value stream mapping. What's below the line, no company now makes their own power stations. No company now has a paper mill making paper for the office. It's a commodity offering. So you buy that off the shelf from someone who is an expert in making paper or making electricity, and it's working out, where is how close is that work to the consumer, and trying to kind of focus there. And it's interesting because you see the kind of the advent of function as a service and serverless, and even people talk about no-ops. That's effectively kind of the end of some of our industries. But I think it's quite exciting, because I always say, as soon as the technology that I offer becomes a commodity, and it doesn't need to be kind of like hand cranked and assembled by a team of people like mine, then it's kind of the right thing to do for the organization, is to say, okay, how can we adopt that quickly and actually go on and do bigger and better things?
So you've been segueing us quite nicely into this next question. If you just circle back for a moment to the comment that you made about having conversations with the business about putting experimentation and hackathons through. I have as well. I'm not quite sure what to do about it. Sorry. So if we just circle back to that comment you made about getting the story points through, do you feel that you've got the commitment that you need from your business in terms of time and budget, or is that a journey that you're on? So do you have things like dedicated full-time product owners? Do you have continuous funding?
So, so my layer, I'm going to be honest, but my layer is actually kind of below the product development team. So my team kind of supply the platform into them, but because of that, I have a very close relationship. So it's not directly my area, but I can kind of speak on my experience of what I see across the entire organization. Is that it really depends on who you ask. So ITV is split into 5 key business units, and we accept the different levels of maturity and also different approaches across all of those. Some will be much more traditional, where we've got to kind of go through the points. Others will be much more open to it. So it really depends on the particular area. Some will say, okay, of course we want to have a hack day, because it means developer engagement is up, and that helps towards recruitment and retention, which ultimately makes actually our lives easier, even if it does, on some columns of a spreadsheet, kind of cost us some story points. Whereas others are much more very, very lean, very, very tight ship. Or it might be actually some of our development is done through an outsourced model. And is it kind of appropriate, they may say, to have an outsourced team that you're paying a kind of a large daily rate for, to spend time not delivering work, when actually the ultimate benefit of that a hack day may not come directly back to the organization. So I think it depends. It was a very kind of slippery answer to give, but it's a very large organization, and it really depends where you look. I mean, the classic line, is the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. I think that's definitely the case in large organizations.
Yeah. So talking of outsourcing and uneven distribution, Mark, how are you feeling about getting what you need from the business in terms of time and budget and dedicated people and funding models that work for you?
So, yeah, we're a large organization. We are trying to turn the dial on that. We have come from a financial year, you have X amount of money to spend on this, that, and the other, and usually we don't have enough money in Q3, we're awash with money in Q4. Don't quote me on that, of course we're not. But what we're trying to move towards is, I think you've alluded to, is a continuous funding in terms of the right to operate. So we'll seed some funding in an area, show me some value, and get some more funding. So we're trying to turn the dial in terms of how we move more towards that model and take some of those blockers away from us. In terms of all of the process that comes with the funding as well, having the money is one thing, but ultimately to the point of spending it and using it wisely, there's usually a lot of red tape in the way. So we're very much looking to streamline that process. From a sponsorship, from the business point of view, so even going back to, as I was saying earlier on, sort of early 2013, there was a recognition that we had to do, we had to respond to the market around us. So I've been very fortunate with the leaders I've worked for and continue to work for that. We don't have unlimited budget, but we have a healthy budget. We can pitch for money. We can ask for more money if something big is coming. So we really have, I would say, had access to funding, but have to stump up the credibility for more funding, if you know what I mean. So when you're on a journey like this, there is a bit of a leap of faith for the first tranche of money that you will get to do some goodness. But what you've got to invest in then is making sure that you're showing that you're bringing value for the investment the business is making. It's something real for them, the what's in it for me question. And ultimately, when you answer that, that builds your credibility and stock value in your organization, and ultimately then gives you the license to operate and continue forward.
Fantastic. And Jelena, have you found similar conversations in terms of earning the right to do more and showing people what's in it for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point. I think people at the end of the day, they want to see a benefit for them. And in this case, everybody needs to see a benefit, and the goal needs to be kind of an overall goal. It's going to maybe sound different on the side of IT or on a business, but at the end of the day, it's the same goal we're going through too, because we need all hands on board really to get somewhere. And one of the things that I absolutely agree that you build your credibility as you go. And I noticed that what I was mentioning as my original kind of experience with UBS, or first experience in investment bank, where we were trusted because our business had no choice, basically. And we proved that we can actually deliver, and that we are indeed a technical expert that they need. And I always go with that model in any other situation. So to give you just going back to hackathon, one of the things that I've been really involved or in that conceptual side of hackathon, which means having a business on board and involved in hackathon is one of the most important things, because then it's not actually why we are, letting people not work 2 days, but it is, oh, we are getting this much for only 2 days paid work. It's like, you put it a little bit in a different perspective. So I would say that one of the biggest achievements was from 2014 until today, I've seen a really increase of business getting involved. Sometimes people that we call entrepreneurs, which are people with a vision inside of the bank, but sometimes even unbelievable parts of the bank, very legacy and old school. Just an example, last year we had legal and compliance coming with some of the topics that we helped them solve through hackathon, and all the others that maybe a few years ago would never even dare to think that hackathon is something for them. So I really think funding has to also make sense. It has to, when business is providing funding for anything new, they need to see the reasoning, and you need to deliver to them results in maybe smaller chunks if they don't believe in the beginning. But from what I notice, if you put the developers or leaders that already have a good reputation, people just take a leap of faith and go for it, business and IT.
That all sounds pretty positive. You've managed to get people to believe in moving forward. Have you had any situations that have been really challenging where the business hasn't really moved, and how does that manifest itself, and what kind of things can you do to keep on pushing, or do you just walk away?
Well, I'm not the type of person that just walks away. I mean, I have a grit to stay there until the end. I always, and this is how I am in life. I always try to see the other side. If somebody doesn't believe in something that is obviously, or for most of the sides, a right way to go, then I want to understand why they don't believe in that. Where is this fear coming from? There is always, you put yourself in other people or another department shoes, and then you find out what is their point of view, and you try to work on that. I always think there is a way to make a compromise. Sometimes you have to also move very slowly before you move really fast. But if this would bring you more people on board and believing in something where you're going, I am happy to go slow for a while before we show them what we can do in the longer term.
Slowly catchy monkey. I often
yes.
Yeah.
I think we've changed actually. There's a great rule I kind of often think about is a 20-60-20 thing, where when you want to kind of make some kind of change, whether it's within your group or kind of externally, there's 20% of people who'll be totally on board straight away. They'll really like the idea. They'll want to support it. The kind of the middle 60% are kind of just totally silent. They want to kind of sit on the fence. They want to kind of see how it's going to pan out. And then you get the back 20 who are kind of very resistant. They dig their heels in, they're shaking their heads, they don't want the change because it's new and it's scary. And it's very tempting often to focus on that noisy back 20 who are resisting the change. I found if you can work out who the middle 60 are and get them on side and convince them, then you've got 80% of the people with you, and either the back 20 either kind of get with it or the opposite. So I think I find that rule seems to apply whenever I try to do anything big like that.
That bell curve for change appetite, we use that a lot. We actually use Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm bell curve, and it's quite an effective way of talking to people about it. I remember a classic quote from, I think it was the IT director of Padpower at the time, Mike. He said, "If you can't change the people, change the people." And the room we were in was like a big he kind of did say, look, you can give them a year to be on the journey, and if they still don't want to be on the bus with you at the end of it, then maybe it's time to part company. So, you can do it nicely. But I think that bell curve does get really interesting, and I think some organisations that we speak to, that bell curve does move slightly because there's kind of history and habits and there's ingrained behaviours. So this quote here from the Transformation Guide talks about the nature of work and organisation evolving from being hierarchical and top-down to multi-directional and collaborative. But if you've got tens of thousands of people that have been working in a sort of command and control organisation structure for quite a while, I think that can be quite challenging. Mark, I wondered if you had a view on that, because I think Lloyd's probably has come from a position where it's been quite command and control and is obviously very, very large.
Yeah, that's right. So it comes down, this is where we move into, the people and the belief systems and the culture that we want to develop within our organisation. And it's a way in which we deal with partners as well, because sometimes the partners themselves want to work in a command and control fashion as well. But what we've been trying to do is work really hard on the ways of working and sort of break down those mentalities, because as soon as you start building relationships between people and allow people to have the license to operate in a different way, realize that they're not going to get told off for ringing the WebSphere administrator directly without going up, across and down, that's when we start seeing real benefit in terms of changing mindsets and leading by example, because people like to see examples of where we can instill change and do things in a different way. Nobody likes red tape, nobody likes frustration, but ultimately there seems to be the requirement for permission. That's certainly something that we're definitely moving away from. And your quote there alluded to the fact that, you know, it's not a siloed organization anymore. We want people to be, you know, east-west conversations, talking directly with people, and ultimately bringing the right people into the team construct so that they can effect change in a much more efficient and quick way.
Fantastic. And I'm going to stay with you, Mark, for the next one, which is about organisational why. So to use Simon Sinek's language, this kind of idea of having an organisational why or a descriptor of the organisational purpose. Do Lloyds Bank have such a cultural asset? And if you do, can you share it with us? And if you do have one, why do you have one? What do you hope to achieve with it?
So at an organisational level, you know, as our mission as a bank is helping Britain prosper, very key part of the UK economy, as you guys know. I'm a bit of a fan of Simon Sinek's work. You know, I recommend you start with Why book to anybody and everybody that will listen to me. But what I've done, when I come to speak about DevOps specifically, across 18,000 people, has been essential for me to build a brand and also be able to build some key messages around, you know, the definition, what does it mean at Lloyds Banking Group, etc. Because as we know, you ask 10 people, you'll get 12 definitions. So I base the conversation around the framework why, how, and what. So our why statement is we want to help you to deliver technology change safely, reliably, and at pace. And then we describe the how we're going to do that, and what we're going to do to implement that as well. So we're very much building a standard, if you like, a two-slider is what I've got, and I share that with all of our transformation teams to make sure that when we talk about being on the bus, we all have that joined up view of what this mystical thing called DevOps really is, and have something to identify with.
Fabulous. And Tom, does ITV have something similar to helping Britain prosper that neatly explicates what you're all about?
Nothing quite as grand as that. I'm sure there's something I could say about Love Island and entertaining people. But I mean, we kind of have a key strategy which we kind of align to. So it's basically, I mentioned at the top of the conversation about how we used to be 95% driven by advertising revenue. One of the things Adam Crozier did when he was CEO was to rebalance the business. And that's really trying to grow an international content business, which is now kind of very, very large and makes up 50% of the revenue. And then the other side is kind of keeping to maximize the free-to-air, the online, and the pay business, which is basically kind of the more traditional side. But the interesting part about that is that that's a consumer-facing proposition. So that's the ITV Hub. It's the channels we broadcast and the interactive stuff. And Carolyn McCall, our new CEO who started in January, she's come in and said, you know, we've got this kind of ability to go direct to our consumer. We need to really maximize and get the benefit from that. So that's kind of where we're going to be focusing. And it's quite interesting from a technology perspective, because, you know, officially we're not a technology company. You know, that has kind of been said, we are a producer, we are a broadcaster. But I think what's going to happen is actually we're going to move from being a tech-enabled company where, you know, technology is a cost center, we're driving for efficiency, into more of a tech-driven kind of company where we aren't, you know, a big tech company, we aren't publicly a tech company, but technology as a function becomes like a first-class citizen in the decision-making and the thinking around that. And that's been quite exciting for us because, again, historically, it's been more kind of tech-enabled, but the move towards tech-driven, especially with the direct-to-consumer kind of offering, has been very, very exciting internally.
And you mentioned earlier on when we were talking about your subjects of your talks at the various DOES events, and you talked a bit about the people focus. Do you have a view on how you currently ascertain what cultural assets you have and how you use them to influence behaviours, and how you describe your current culture and whether you have a target culture in mind?
It's an interesting question. And I think it kind of goes back to the point about historically technology was, you know, kind of just an enabler and a cost center. So I think there's a kind of the concept of one ITV, and obviously everyone is aware of the company and everyone's kind of aware of the kind of the content we produce and the work we do, and everyone recognizes the brand. Technology itself is trying to kind of grow its own internal culture. I think historically, again, we had the 5 business units, and the technology approach was kind of quite siloed, intentionally siloed and appropriately siloed within those business units. And it meant that inside those units, technology got very, very close to our business partners and our kind of our bits of the business, which is great because they saw more technology than they'd ever seen before. I think the challenge we have now is that ultimately we have kind of a slightly fragmented technology structure in the 5 kind of business units, although there is kind of one CTO above them. Making sure they're talking east to west, I think, is a great way to think about it, because thinking in network terms, like east to west traffic between them is perfect, kind of north to south in the business division. And so there is talk about how can we develop a culture, how can we make sure we're aligned whilst also being aligned with the business. And, you know, matrix management and matrix kind of structures used to be kind of a swear word, and is now actually, I think we've kind of come full cycle again, and it's working out how we can apply that in the 21st century in a way that kind of works for, you know, our business units as well as the technology function.
Yeah. Is that something you see in your business, Jelena, in terms of matrix management and how to change culture across fragmented or siloed areas?
Yeah, I mean, it took us a while actually also to kind of master that matrix structure. I've seen over the time trying to go first into more kind of the pools style of managing IT and connecting IT with business. But I think that combination of having technology across the businesses, but also somehow working together toward the goal, it's what works the best. I mean, this is where we are right now, and it seems to come out of all these trials that we had over the years, where we saw that it's either creating very isolated culture or it's just confusing people, because you also have to stick with a certain strategy that is kind of aligned with the overall company strategy, but it still makes sense for the people in their daily business. So, you know, overall, obviously, we need to satisfy all the client needs, and they're very diverse. And so we have asset management and wealth management and investment bank. But in reality, if you are coming to your work and you're working in IT, you just really want to know, what am I supporting? What should I do today? And where am I going with this, you know? And so I think with a matrix kind of organization, we achieve that. But time will only tell how this works in a long term. In reality, I do believe that like a technology, I think the organization organization has to move a bit and has to have a possibility to adapt to what is going on. So I would say, and honestly, I'm not the CEO, I cannot tell you what the strategy will be, but from a logical point of view, I can imagine that we need to be able to adapt, and we need to be able to motivate our people to keep them happy and satisfied with what they have, but also to, you know, keep on reminding them of an overall goal, so that we benefit, but that they also don't feel like they're lost.
So if we take that moment of thinking about being able to adapt really quickly and being able to adapt to changing customer needs quickly, what kind of things have you done to shorten the time from hearing about what that customer need is to delivering what it is that they want out there?
So in my case, I mean, I worked in a places where we had a possibility. This is not always possible, but in our case, I could just put actually all the people, representatives of the business and representatives of technology or products that we were working on from technical point of view, sit them together and let them talk, having a discussion and, coming up with the ideas, but also coming up with the efforts needed behind certain ideas that sometimes business come up with, but they are not realistic maybe and cannot be done in 6 months, but maybe 1 year. If you put everybody together, you get to some, let's say, not only a conversation, but each side can teach the other side what they want and how this can be achieved. So I'm a more, let's say I'm maybe a little bit harmonical person, but I just like putting people together and make them talk and find a way to achieve what they want.
which is great in an ideal world. But I'm going to just ask Mark how easy it is to get those people in the same room, and how easy it is to get them to behave in an appropriate way always.
Well, exactly. So, you know, our organization geographically dispersed, use offshore suppliers. But coming back to, you know, shortening the gap really. So something we spent some time doing this year is looking at our offerings around a value stream lens. So that instead of projects and programs, what is the mortgages value stream, for example, the sort of thing that we sell, and bringing the business as close to that as possible, so that we have the product owner for mortgages value stream that can define and prioritize and work with the engineering lead to work out exactly where what goes to the top of the backlog and what gets done first. And having that in an agile context, you know, your MVP approach, you know, your sprints every other week, showing some business value so that we can get those guys working closer together. And I think, again, coming back to the culture, it's about how we choose to operate as well. Having small feature teams, you know, 2 pizza box teams is one of the analogies that is used. But ultimately, you know, 10, 12 people with access to all of the, if you like, the enterprise functions you would need in order to affect that change into production context, and ultimately get that proposition in front of the customers. Technology as well plays a great role in this. So again, I'm much more divorced from the technology, but a nod to technology, quoting Tom from earlier, that certainly has a play here. But the biggest value is getting the people involved and getting the people working as closely together as possible. Yeah. When we're dispersed, technology's got a big play in that. Obviously, collaboration tools, making sure that we can work effectively. That's where we've seen the biggest benefit over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Anything to add to that, Tom?
You know, it's been a kind of a similar story at ITV. So historically, we were kind of very waterfall based, and we had lots of different silos, kind of functional silos, and the work was varied around. Or, you know, kind of a consultancy was kind of brought in to do a project. So we, you know, we'd bring the consultants in, they'd spend X months learning the space, they'd make the change, then they'd pass it over to a different team, and the knowledge went out the window. As part of a large modernization program that the CTO kicked off about 4 or 5 years ago, is coming to an end now. We basically shifted towards agile, top to bottom, and we kind of did that through product teams. And so we kind of mentioned before about having a 2 pizza box team, give them a domain, so like broadcast scheduling or talent payments or rights, and say, here's a product owner who is sometimes from our business and sometimes actually as a technology person, it depends, a delivery manager, a number of developers, and then a platform engineer from my team. And, you know, they operate like a mini startup. So they maintain, you know, their own roadmap aligned to kind of the strategy and the portfolio, but their own roadmap, their own backlog, and they operate kind of not independently, but they are kind of a unit, and they can actually be self-sufficient. And one of the things I've done, and I spoke about at the previous DOES events, is, you know, how the platform has supported that. Historically, there was one really big shared infrastructure across everything. And so if you wanted to make a change, you had to coordinate, you had to go to a CAB, you had to get permission, you had to ask. And one of the key things I did when I designed the common platform, which is our cloud agile hosting platform, was to really bake in this concept of blast radius reduction. How can we actually say that actually, even if things go catastrophically wrong, let's say a security breach or a deployment that fails, how can you limit the blast radius of that going wrong? And so now the product teams I mentioned, they actually get deployed onto an instance of the common platform. So it does kind of confuse people. When I say there's a common platform, it's common but not shared. And so every product team has their own independent instance. And it means if you're the product owner and you want to do a release on a Friday afternoon and your team have bought into it and it goes wrong, the only thing you can really hurt is your particular kind of product that you're hosting within that instance. And so it's kind of taking that kind of approach and actually making sure we can react very, very quickly to what our business partners are saying, maintaining that backlog, talking with them. And for them, they can get features in and requests in, and things fixed within, you know, days, weeks at the outside, when historically it could take months or even years to get changes through. So it's been quite an exciting journey for our business partners as well. Although I will kind of say that I think one of the lessons learned is when we adopted Agile top to bottom, there were some areas where we forgot to kind of take some of our business people on the journey, and they were used to getting fully featured, delivered things at the end. Of course, they wouldn't have the right features because we'd gone off into our waterfall process and we did the design 6 months ago, but they were used to getting things that were claimed to be fully featured. Whereas when we first gave some of the teams an MVP, they're like, where's the rest of it? But that was just kind of lessons learned. I think now we're in a much more mature place, and our business love it because they can say, great, can I have this? It'll help me sell more Love Island. Great, it's done. It's there within the week. So.
That little and often approach, so important from a kind of product definition perspective, but also from the architectural perspective, as you just described. So we're on the last question with just a few minutes left. So we're going to take our crystal balls out and look into the future a little bit. So let's start with Tom again, since we're there. How do you see the DevOps Target Operating Model in years to come in terms of how business and IT will work together? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've kind of come to the term, I think, evaporation in a weird way, in that, you know, there won't be kind of a DevOps function. I think these product teams that I mentioned, you know, that is the evolution of DevOps to me. It's kind of people working together. And I think we're already seeing it in ITV, like I mentioned earlier on, you know, in online, our product teams, our technology product teams historically have become part of the organization. And I think that trend is going to continue. And you'll just be, you know, a technologist, a developer, platform engineer, etc., within a function, working just side by side. And I think actually the term DevOps will just become business as usual. And I think that's probably where we're going to be heading, I think.
Let's hope so. Mark, what do you think? Similar or different?
Yeah, quite similar. So I was at a talk yesterday, oh, it was Wednesday, oddly enough, where we were talking about no-ops, which again is something that's surfacing in the industry. But yeah, we all debated that. However, you know, I'm definitely of the mode that less ops rather than no ops, which we coined another phrase at the panel session I was on. But ultimately, for me, it's about blurring the lines. I don't think we'll have, you know, dedicated operations teams and dedicated development teams. You know, we'll have all those guys in that product team, in that feature team. The engineers on the ground from the development organizations will evolve and get more of an operations mindset. I think one of the things we do really well is problem change incident management, you know, and we're still going to have those disciplines. They're still very important, but I think it's important, equally as important, to ensure that the dev and ops guys really become one team. And I'm with Tom there. I can't see us talking about that term for much longer.
Nice. And Jelena, your view?
Well, I actually don't really like definitions and terms, and I don't really care how we call something. But so if we call it something else than DevOps, you know, it doesn't really matter to me, because as I also mentioned, and everybody in this call, even historically, we did this kind of style of work without knowing how it's called. So for me, it will evolve just logically. Again, like everybody else said, there needs to be work together on a common goal. And however that in some cases in our company, it's possible to actually keep on your product. Sometimes you have to work with other teams and different products to deliver one product at the end for the customers. So I think just working together and actually not really thinking what is your job, but understanding different jobs and maybe learning some other skills in the way. So even if you're a technical person, not knowing business seems silly to me. So you have to combine these skills, and that will enable people to work together without any problems. And hopefully, you know, in the future, we don't need to call it anything else, but just a company that delivers, in our case, banking services, financial services to the users, and in other case, any other company or whatever they're doing.
Fabulous. And final words for you, Jelena. Your talk at DevOps Enterprise Summit in London, what's it going to be about?
Well, it's just going to be about my journey in UBS and how I came to certain concepts from experiences that I brought in today's team, but also, you know, just really a journey and what I learned and what I can share with the audience, and maybe get a bit of a feedback from them. I think nothing spectacular, like maybe the guys in the call, but you know, maybe somebody will find themselves in my story, and maybe it will inspire them and give them some ideas. And I'm expecting to kind of learn the same from all the other people that are speaking on the conference.
Great. I'm so looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to your talk and Tom's and hearing Mark's from Vegas as well. So the event is the DevOps Enterprise Summit. It is a week on Monday and Tuesday on June the 25th and 26th in London at the O2. On the screen now is a discount code, FOG20, FOG20, Friends of Gene 20, which you can get 20% off your ticket. So please do use that if you haven't bought your ticket already. We would love to see you there. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jelena. Hope you've enjoyed it. I've very much enjoyed hearing your thoughts. I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.